Hi guys, today I wanted to talk about how you can get into reading. This is going to be a bunch of tips for getting into reading. You might want to look at some of these tips to help your goals, or whether it's just a passion that you used to have that you want to get back into. I could do an entire video on the benefits of reading. There are so many benefits. The tips come with some different book recommendations, not just books I enjoy, because obviously I want this to be applicable to tons of different people. But that is a really good tip if you can find a YouTuber, TikToker, Instagrammer, anything that has a similar taste to what you like, because that is a great way to find books you're gonna love. Okay, but let's get started with some background. I was really into reading my entire life growing up. I love writing my own little books, reading books. There was tons of like kids series I used to read, and I kind of remember one day I was just thinking like, I'm so busy, I've started to get like more homework, I'm reading for class, and I really just don't have the time to read, and I kind of faded out of it, which is such a shame. And then I have a very similar story that I believe a lot of people have. During 2020 I got back into reading. Prior to this I had tried to get back into reading a few times. Oh my gosh, I'm going back so far, but in sixth form I took English. I'd always studied English growing up, and I thought I was going to study English at university, but I think one of the reasons I stopped enjoying reading is because I was studying it as a subject. And don't get me wrong, I can enjoy things I study. I love what I ended up studying, sociology. Being forced to read books that I wouldn't necessarily read or choose to read was sort of taking up my time and not leaving room to explore books I would like to read, and it also made it seem like more of a chore than a hobby. And I also found it really difficult to switch my brain off and just appreciate a book rather than trying to think about how I'd write an essay on it. Which is funny because now on my YouTube channel I kind of like think about how I would talk to you guys about books. Kind of like I've swapped, and I'm still like analysing in my head as I go. I tried to get back into reading a few times. Even in sixth form, like I said, I was in English and I was in some extension classes, so we read lots of other books for that. I was trying to pick up a lot of literary fiction or some classics, but just none of it pulled me in. In 2020, during lockdown, one day I was just so bored, as I'm sure tons of us were, and I ordered an entire box set of Twilight, which is the first book that I really remember enjoying. There were tons of series I read when I was younger. I'll pop some up on the screen. I kind of only remember the like vibes rather than the exact book series. Pick up some books that you remember enjoying in your childhood, whether that's a book you read in class that you sort of think shaped you quite a lot, or just things that were popular when you were growing up and things that you have fond memories of. So some things off the top of my head, obviously Twilight, so nostalgic and such a comforting read to me. So if you feel similarly about it, it might be useful to pick that up to sort of spark your interest in reading again. Divergent was really big in the 2010s, obviously Hunger Games, tons of people feel nostalgic about that. Oh, and I haven't read Harry Potter, but Harry Potter is a really good one for a lot of people to sort of reinvigorate their interest in reading. My next tip is going to be to just start. I want to talk about micro habits here for a second. So micro habits are basically simple actions that only take a few minutes, if that, out of your routine, and they're basically so easy it's almost harder for you not to do them, and they're making a big impact on your day. So some other examples might be just drinking 1 glass of water before your coffee, making your bed, or like I'm gonna suggest just reading 3 pages of your book. Now all of these things, I say it's almost harder not to do them because they impact your day so much that if you don't do them and they take so little time and so little effort, then it's like you're setting yourself back so much by not doing these tiny little habits. So I do this with non-fiction because although I love reading, and I do love reading non-fiction, I really struggle to get through it. I think I read 1.5 non-fiction books last year, and this year I'm trying to read 3, so very achievable goal, hopefully. What I did during summer was, for me, I picked an amount, so that was 10 pages a day, and just while I was having my morning coffee or before I went to bed, I just read 10 pages. And whatever goal you pick yourself, whether that's 3 pages, 10 pages, 1 chapter, you just want to pick something that is so easy and so simple, but as long as you continue the habit every day, and it's going to make such a big impact. So just starting on a really small level is such a good way to get into reading. My next tip is to read some shorter books, and I personally love this when I'm in a reading slump and I need a pick-me-up and I just need some things that are going to boost my confidence, because reading shorter books is great because every time you finish a book you sort of get like this boost of confidence and encouragement and motivation to read more. And if you're reading shorter books, you're reading them quicker, and then you get more boost of encouragement, if that makes sense. Also, I think reading shorter books is great because then you can read more books, and reading more books helps you figure out what you like, what you don't like, what tropes you like, what genres, authors, etc. And so if you're reading more books and you're figuring this out quicker, you can find books that you enjoy more, if that makes sense. Finding books that you like more is going to motivate you more because you're actually going to enjoy the stories. I could list tons of popular short books, but for some recommendations, I've just gone through my Goodreads TBR and ranked them by highest rated under my short bookshelf. So I have Breakwater by Catherine Jones Payne, Eden Brook by Julianne Donaldson, How Parallel by Elizabeth O'Rourke and Radiance by Grace Draven. There's a little bit of variety here. Eden Brooke's historical. Parallel I think is contemporary with some sci-fi elements. Breakwater I believe is about mermaids and is maybe historical or fantasy. These are just some ones I've been meaning to read, and they are all under 300 pages, but short books are definitely the way to go to get started. So I just want to build off what I was saying when I was saying to find books that you enjoy and not just popular books. So a good way to do this is think about what TV shows you like, what movies you like, what books you've liked in the past if you were into reading, even music, or just what stands out to you, what sounds interesting. So for example, I know with me, I really liked fantasy books growing up. I was really into the Mortal Instruments series, and obviously Twilight, Fallen, and Hush Hush, all those growing up. And while I did like books, say the dystopia ones like Hunger Games, Divergent, all of those, I always gravitated towards the fantasy books. So when I was picking up reading, I knew that fantasy was a genre I really liked. So figuring out what you like and not just following what's popular is really good to find books you enjoy. Obviously, you don't want to just pick up the classics. So when I was trying to get back into reading, I had a bunch of historical sort of classics, so some Jane Austen novels like Emma, and I tried to get into them but they just weren't pulling me in, and it had me thinking maybe reading just wasn't for me. But you know, there are so many books out there, reading is for everyone, and you don't want to just focus on what people say sounds good on TikTok or the covers or what you might like look cool reading. And I know that sounds funny, but honestly, like, I have that too. If there's a book with a cover that looks great, I'm always more motivated to read it, which I'll get into later because you can use that to your advantage. But maybe you're not going to look as cool on the train reading a Christmas novella as you will reading Atomic Habits or Jane Austen, but if it gets you into reading, then that's what's most important. Okay, my next tip is to read seasonally. So I love a good vibe and aesthetic, and I think reading the right books can really add to that and motivate you. So let me explain a little bit more. For example, in September, back to school season, you might want to read some like dark academia books to get you motivated or to let your surroundings inspire you a bit. So The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake is great for that. Or when it gets to October, Halloween, reading spooky books is perfect for that time of year. So you might want to read some more mystery books. So like Verity by Colleen Hoover is like a suspense romance, or House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, I've heard is really good and is on my TBR as a mystery. Or like I was saying before, Christmas novellas. When it gets to December, nothing is better than reading a Christmas book. So one of the ones I really liked was Window Shopping by Tessa Bailey. But if you're having, like, let me set the scene, a Bailey's hot chocolate, sitting on the couch reading a Christmas book, and it's snowing or it's cold outside and you're rugged up and there's candles and you've got blankets, there's literally not a better feeling. Or let's say it's April, so we're getting into spring now. I like books for spring that are more lighter hearted, maybe some more like chick lit kind of things. I just read The Secret Bridesmaid, that was really good. It is set in more autumn winter, but the vibes to me are very good for reading in spring. Or one that focuses on nature. Books with nature and describing flowers and stuff like that are perfect for spring. In the Weeds by B.K. Borison, which is the second book after Love Light Farms. Love Light Farms is like a Christmas book, another really good one for Christmas. And then In the Weeds to me is very like spring vibes. And then obviously July, summer, you want to be reading beach reads and summery books. So Beach Read by Emily Henry is an obvious choice. Or another one I've been dying to read is The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley. I really hope that's how you pronounce her last name. But anyway, reading seasonally, setting the vibe, motivating you, and just taking inspiration from your environment or where you are to inspire your TBR. I feel like I have so many tips, there's still so many to go, but I love talking about this and I hope this is useful to you guys. So my next tip is to read before bed. So having reading in your schedule means that if you're following your routine and habits, you are by default going to read, which will get you into reading. Now, I'm saying to read before bed because it's a great way to wind down, to lessen your screen time, and to get reading into your routine, and also that's what I mainly do. But if you want to read when you're having your morning coffee or on your lunch break, just fit reading into your routine wherever it works best for you. And personally for me, you might want to read different books at different times of the day. So for example, when I'm doing my routine well with my morning coffee, I like to read a non-fiction book to sort of get my brain going for the day. Before you go to bed, I always think it's great to have a book that you're like dying to pick up. You can't stop thinking about it throughout the day, because if you're trying to get to bed earlier, it gets you into bed physically earlier, even if you're not asleep. And even if you're tired, it gives you the motivation to pick it up. A great book for this is the Zodiac Academy series, which I have been loving. The next tip is not to be afraid of DNFing. Now, DNF, if you don't know, means did not finish, and it's sort of a way to classify books that you picked up and you just decided were not for you. And life is too short for a bad book, and there is nothing worse than being put in a reading slump. So if you're not enjoying a book, just don't waste your time. I have this really great quote in my reading journal by C.S. Lewis, and it's on my DNF DNF page and I want to read it, there are far better things ahead than any we leave behind. Now, I have that on my DNF page to remind me that it's okay to DNF books. There are so many books out there that I'm going to better enjoy, and like I said, life is too short to read books that you're not loving. Okay, my next tip, and I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about cool covers, is to go to a bookstore and buy a book. Now, this might be obvious because if you're going to get into reading, you're going to go to a bookstore, but buying a book with a cool cover, obviously one that you will enjoy, like I spoke about earlier, not just because the cover looks really cool, but for example, if there's a special edition or if there's a genre you're looking in, find a cover that speaks to you to motivate you a bit. And even just the feeling of buying a book and the memories associated with, say you're on holiday and you buy it in a certain place or you go to a cool bookstore, that really motivates me personally. And not to mention, bookstores are just such fun places to visit. So 2 examples of this, I recently bought Kingdom of the Curse, which is the second book after Kingdom of the Wicked. I got a really nice hardcover, which I've shown off in a couple reading vlogs. I got it from Indigo and I've been dying to read it, and I did buy it because of the hardcover. It was so pretty. And also I did just buy again the Indigo special edition of From Lukov with Love. Been on my TBR for ages, but I saw that edition and I was like, that's immediately going up on my TBR. Okay, my next tip is to try audiobooks. So this isn't something I've personally done. I've never read an audiobook, but I really want to this year. That's going to be one of my goals. I'm trying to diversify the way I read and my reading in general, and I'd love to try an audiobook. But if you have a long commute time or you enjoy listening to podcasts, this is a perfect way to get into books and to fit it into your routine. So obviously I haven't read any audiobooks, but I was also looking for recommendations for myself, and some of the ones I saw recommended were Daisy Jones and the Six. I know there's like a TV show coming out about it, so it'd be great to read it before it comes out. But also apparently there's a bunch of different voice actors and it's a really immersive experience. So I've heard really good things about that, and I actually might try read it on audiobook myself. I saw it's on Spotify for free, and I've also heard really good things about Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. So it is worth, if you're on Goodreads, just having a look at reviews, because often people review the actual book and then they'll also mention the audiobook elements like narration and voice actors and stuff like that. Can really make a big difference in your listening experience, so do check those out. And also, if you have Spotify, there are tons of free audiobooks on Spotify and people do not realize that, so check that out as well. Okay, so we are on to my last tip, and I've been filming for way longer than I thought, but my last tip is to read books with TV shows or movies. So having a story that you're already invested in, where you already love the characters, again can really motivate you to get into a book. And I also think that having the visuals already there to associate with the novel can really immerse you in a read better, and again that's a great way to immerse you within the book while you're reading, because you're not struggling to try and imagine what's on the page. So some classic examples are The Fault in Our Stars, all of the dystopian books from the 2010s, but some more recent ones that would be really good are House of the Dragon and the Game of Thrones series, and also the Bridgerton series. So I really hope some of these tips resonated with you guys and are going to help you guys get into reading. Do comment down below what you guys are reading at the minute. I'd love to hear, and I'd love to talk more about this. So if you guys have any tips, do leave them in the comments for any other people who might want to get into reading. And yeah, just thank you so much for watching. And if you did like this video, please do like and subscribe, because I'd love to see you guys next time. And thank you again just so much for watching.